All right. So there's no editing. It's all rough. I'll get that to you as soon as I can. So number one, you get your stock, crown the stock. Number two, draw on your first plumb line. This is representative of the center of the hip. So when I start doing hip layout, in this particular case here, I have a 412 roof. If it was a common rafter, I would be using 4 on the tongue, 12 on the body, outside of square, bottom edge of stock, bottom edge of stock. But I'm not cutting a common rafter, I'm cutting a hip rafter. So I'm still using 4. Remember the unit triangle changed? Now I'm using 17. 4 and 17. Outside of square, bottom edge of stock, 4 and 17. You'll see that I took the line right up to the tip of the piece of lumber. That's going to be way easier for me to hook my tape on right at the tip of the lumber to drag it down than it is if I just arbitrarily decide to lay out my first plumb line down here. So try and do yourself some favors. Okay? Step 3, hook your tape measure on, okay, and measure down your calculated total line length for the hip. Right? So I measure all the way down, let's say to here. Again, with my framing square, 4 and 17, line it up with my mark. 4 and 17, draw my second plumb line. This second plumb line, which is step 3, twice. This second plumb line represents the outside corner of the building. So far, no different than the common rafter, agreed? First plumb line represents center of ridge. Second plumb line, your total line length of the rafter, outside corner of the building. Okay, now I'm going to go from my outside of building to the outside of fascia. So that is the tail line length of my hip. I measure from my second plumb line further down to my third plumb line right there. Okay, 4 and 17. Okay, 4 and 17. And I've run out of rafter. Okay. We're not using a speed square. I've run out of rafter. Pack up, go home for the day. Maybe cry a little bit on the way home. No, we don't do that. Okay, remember what we do? Flip, we flip. Okay, now I'm coming off the top. I'm going to draw the exact same line. There's 4 and 17, my third plumb line. That represents the outside of the fascia. Next, we're going to draw on the seat cut of the hip. From this, we need to borrow some information from the common rafter. We need to go over, and on our common rafter, we need to measure our heel height from the common rafter. So we have to go back, we have to steal this measurement. all of your common rafters are identical. And for the most part, we don't care what it is. As long as the seat cut's greater than 1.5 inches and shorter than the wall it sits on, right? That's what the code book says. So that heel height could be whatever. You're going to transfer the heel height over here to your hip rafter. So let's say on that rafter there, you had a heel height of 5 inches. You come over to your hip rafter, you measure down 5 inches. You draw your seat cut at 5 inches down. Now I choose a low slope like 412 and a relatively tall heel height like 5 inches to show you how ridiculously large the bird's mouth is on a hip. The rule of it has to stay inside the wall doesn't actually fit here. Okay? It won't. There's no way it can. Okay? Hips lay at a much flatter angle than the rest of the roof. Remember, it's taking them 17 inches to come in to go up 6 inches, or in this case 4 inches. 17.4. Your common rafter is going 12.4, 12.4, 12.4, 17.4, 17.4. They're a much lower slope. Okay? Big old bird's mouth. We're not done. Next thing we have to do is drop. Drop the hip, and this is done by raising the seat cut. And I'll put the formula down one more time. Half the hip stock thickness divided by the unit run times the unit rise. Aim for a 412. That's going to be 3/4 of an inch divided by 17 times 4. Okay, it's going to be roughly a heavy 1/8 of an inch. So for a 412 in the real world, I would be hard pressed to even drop the hip. But because we're in the theory world, New England carpenters everywhere just rolled over in their grave because I said that. I better draw it in. Right? I don't want any hate mail from any of those guys. Okay, so we draw the hip drop in. Okay, next thing we're done all our basic layout. Nothing else is going to happen to the bird's mouth. Okay, the plumb line sits tight to the corner of the building. The seat cut is ridiculous and huge because it's a hip. All we had to do was drop it. The middle of the rafter is done. What we need to do now is come back to the top and shorten the top first plumb line. Okay, we're going to do that by 1/2 the 45-degree the ridge stock thickness. So at the top here, okay, and this is important. I know you're taking notes, but look up here first. Okay? If our ridge is 1.5 inches, then the full diagonal of 1.5 inches, I know we've said this a bunch of times, 1.5, 1.5, is 2 1/8. So we need to go half the ridge stock thickness. Look here, please take note of this. This measurement is done by using your square and measuring perpendicular from your first line. Okay? So from here, I'm going to come back 1 1/16. Square from that line. Biggest mistake people make is they put their tape measure at the top of the rafter and they measure down. That would be the hypotenuse of the triangle. I don't want that. I want the base of the triangle, 1 inch and 1/16. Okay? Draw on your line. Now, we get into hip roofs or we get into some newer houses, we may have engineered wood components. We may have LVLs that we're dealing with, and they may not be 1.5 inches. They could be 1 3/4 inches. Right? So you'll notice that I always say half the 45-degree ridge stock thickness, and I don't just say come back 1 1/16 inches, because if your ridge isn't a 2x8, if it's 1 3/4 by 9.5 LVL, 1 1/16 inches isn't going to work. Okay? You need more like 1 1/4 inches. Okay, the next time we're going to come back, we're going to shorten the third line. That's the outside of fascia. We need to bring our hip back to the inside of the fascia. So we will shorten the third line by the full 45-degree fascia stock thickness. The full 45 for fascia is 2 1/8 if it's 2x material. If it's 1x4 fascia, then it's going to be 1 1/16 inches because it's half. If you're for some reason doing fascia out of 4x4s, I don't know what building that would be, it would be a different measurement. And if you can't or don't have the time to do Pythagorean, you've got a framing square. Draw 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches box. It's also got a ruler all the way around it, graduated in 10ths, 12ths, 16ths, and 8ths. Measure. Well, would you look at that? That's 2 1/8 inches. Just like the top one, though, we have to make sure that when we measure back 2 1/8 inches, that we measure back square from that line, 2 1/8. Okay? And I will draw on my plumb line. 4/17. There's my bottom short. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to nip the tail for the fascia. Your fascia is going to come in, right? It's a 2x4 material, or 2x6 or 2x8 or whatever it is. So your fascia is going to come in and it's going to be below the line here. So 1.5 inches down. So I've got my framing square here. I push it forward until it starts to touch this line here. And this line really represents the bottom of my plywood. And then what I can do is I can put a little mark here. Okay? That's where the fascia board's going to actually get nailed onto. And then from there, from that point there, I can come down and say I'm using 2x6 for fascia. That's 5.5 inches right there. Well, it would look pretty dumb, and I would look pretty dumb, if I cut this hip and then I put it up and I had 3 or 4 inches of hip sticking out below the fascia. So all I'm going to do is simply one little quick measurement like that. I'm going to chop it off. The horizontal line there. Now look at what I did. That's the mark I made. I arbitrarily came up about 1/4 inch above that. I don't want it to come down. I don't want it to interfere with the soffit at all. Get it up there. There's still lots of meat here to nail onto. The next thing I need to do is I need to take my hip rafter and I need to make it pointy. I need to make the end of it pointy so it fits into the corner between those two commons at the top and into the corner between the fascia boards at the bottom. And so I wrote down a little bit of instructions here, okay? Add cheek cut lines. Half the hip stock above, half the hip stock below. That's going to be 4 new lines, 2 lines at number 1, plumb line, and 2 lines at number 3, plumb line. That sounds like Greek to me, and I wrote it on the board, so hopefully the picture helps us out. Okay, here's our first plumb line here. It's been shortened. I need to create a point on this board. So what I can do with this is I can square on this shortened line. I can go 3/4 of an inch back. I can go 3/4 of an inch forward. I'll do it again down here, right? I can go 3/4 of an inch back and 3/4 of an inch forward. Lines in blue. Three-quarters and 3/4 in my world still equal to 1.5 inches, so I can use my square. I can draw this line here and this line here. These are going to be my cut lines. I'll explain. Here's my shortened line here, right? That's my shortening. And from that line, I'll do the exact same thing, okay? From that line, I'm going to get 3/4 back, 3/4 forward. From that line, 3/4 back, 3/4 forward. Cut line and cut line. Look at the 3D drawing. The first one, right, I came back square off of my plumb line to my shortening. Yeah? And then I drew on my shortening line here. If I took that shortening line and I drug it across the top, it would look like that. Everyone following? Okay? If I drew a line right at the center of my rafter, right there, 3/4 of an inch, right? And I then came from here back 3/4, I would draw a 45, and if I came here, back 3/4 here, I would draw a 45, and I would put a point on the end of my rafter. Does everyone see that? Keep watching. This line right here, if I bring this line here to the front face of my rafter, this line is now 3/4 of an inch in front of my shortening line. This line here, if I draw it back like that, is now 3/4 of an inch behind my line. When I take my skill saw and I tilt my skill saw face to 45 degrees and lock it in, when I cut down this plumb line here, this new line that I've cut here, I'm going to cut the entire piece off at a 45 like that. So I'm going to cut down, then I'm going to walk around the stock, and I'm going to put my saw on this cut line, and I'm going to cut up, which is going to cut 45 back the other direction. And what I'm going to be left with is a point. Pretty hard to do on the whiteboard. So, that's what these extra lines are for. The first line was your theoretical ridge. The second line was shortening, half the 45-degree hip stock thickness. The line 3/4 back and 3/4 forward is just to make the cheek cut. At the bottom, first line outside of fascia, second line full 45-degree fascia stock thickness shortening. 3/4 forward, 3/4 back for your cheek cut. Now this is important, okay? This doesn't have to do with layout. This has to do with cutting them. Okay? We cut our topmost line first, then our second line, and at the bottom, we cut our bottommost line first, and then our top line. You're standing there with skill saw in hand, ready to cut these cheek cuts. It's set to 45 degrees, the base is locked, you're limbered up, you're feeling good, the stock is clamped down, saw is in your hand, guard is slightly retracted so not pulling you all over the place. You pull the trigger, okay, and you cut up this line right here. Look at what falls away. All your waste. You cut up here, then you have to turn around, and you have to come back down the second line. And you will make a nice point. You've already cut half the point, making the second half of the point. Let me ask you this. If you were to cut this line first, all of your other marks would fall away, you wouldn't know where to cut again. If you cut this line first from the top down, your rafter is still salvageable. Draw a line across the top, find the center, come back, draw the second half of it. If you cut this back line up, the piece of wood is no good anymore. You've cut the wrong cheek on the wrong side and it's now too short. There's nothing you can do. At the bottom, the far line, you're going to cut up, then you're going to walk around to this second line and cut down, and you'll have a point. Then you're going to nip the tail off so it doesn't stick below the fascia. Then you're going to come up, cut out this gargantuan prisma. Okay? Hip rafter done. Can't copy it. Put that one aside, pull out the next piece, crown it. First plumb line, measure down. Second plumb line, measure down. Flip, flip, plumb line. Seat cut, same height as the common rafter. Drop it, whatever your hip drop is. Go to the top. Shorten half the 45-degree hip ridge stock thickness at the top. Shorten the bottom, full 45-degree fascia stock thickness. It's like a Dr. Seuss. Draw it. Nip the tail so that it doesn't stick past the fascia in depth. And then cheek cuts top, cheek cuts bottom. Hip's done. Third hip. First plumb line, second plumb line, third plumb line, seat cut, drop the seat cut. Shorten top, shorten bottom, cheeks top, cheeks bottom, nip the tail, cut it all out. Fourth hip. First plumb line, second plumb line, third plumb line. Seat cut matching commons, drop the hip. Shorten top, shorten bottom, add cheek cuts, cut, cut, fourth hip done. Carry them over, hand them up. The hip is cut, the tail is cut, it drops in, it fits perfect. No one has to be on a step ladder, out 2 stories up trying to cut the tail after you run string lines through to locate the tail. Right? It's not safe and it's not cost effective. If you built square, you stayed plumb level and square up your first story, 2 story, or 3 stories, everything works out, then you should be able to cut the hips on the ground, pass them up as one piece, and be done with it. Okay? Now, if you didn't square your floor up, your walls are all over the place, right? Then you'll probably want to just get some string lines, some levels, a little bit of pixie dust, right? So that you can fly, and then just basically fudge those hips in. But they don't need to be fudged in. They can all be calculated and cut. I know it's a lot of lines. That's why we videotaped it, so that you can watch it again and again. This will be the second hip video that'll be online. So watch them both. Please, watch them both. They're just sitting there collecting, well, they're not collecting dust. One of them gets all sorts of views. All right? So just watch, watch, watch. Questions before I move on? Everyone's got the notes? Do yourself a favor, take the notes to shop class. Or watch the crap out of the videos. The only thing that's going to be a drag is in shop. No, I think, yeah, we do. We have 2x6s for you to cut the hips out of. Right? But really, 2x8s and 2x10s feel better.